Welcome back to the Hip Hop Report. This is Rambo Hustle. And of course, today we'll be discussing Nipsey Hussle's brand new project alongside Bino Rideaux with Marathon Continues and All Money In, Prolific.
On now.
I met Nipsey the day he got his first deal with Cinematic. We were in West Hollywood somewhere. I really didn't know who he was at the time, but to me, he always had this presence about him because, partly because he was so tall. He was a big guy, a lot like Snoop was, where like maybe artists like J-Rock and Kendrick could walk in a room and nobody noticed because they're shorter, they don't demand all that attention. Nipsey could never hide from the public eye. As soon as Nipsey walked in a room, even if you didn't know who he was, even if you had no idea about music or hip hop or rap at all, you were like, who is that? Because he commanded attention. And he had what the kids today called aura. And he didn't have to aura farm for it. Nipsey was a natural presence in any room that he walked into. And because of that, I think is, largely why he generated the kind of traction and motion that we saw from Nipsey Hussle before his passing, not just, from business standpoint, from music standpoint, but in business and just general attention from the industry. He demanded respect. He was somebody that, didn't have to conform to what the sound was in the West Coast. He can generate his own sound. And that's why we have to review this album. Let's talk about it. Prolific. Bino and Nipsey is not their first project. Matter of fact, the No Pressure mixtape was the last time that we heard from these two artists together. And of course, Bino has evolved and his sound has more or less adapted to the times and to the sound of what's going on in the music genre right now. Not just that, but also in the West Coast. Now, of course, I think Nipsey and Bino have a great relationship and chemistry on record because Bino does a lot of vocalizations and singing, which allows Nipsey to really be as quote unquote prolific, as his tattoo says, on record and focus on his raps. Nipsey was never someone who tried to be a singer or a crooner or do any of those other things that the industry suggests that you have to do both of to be successful. Nipsey, of course, had a huge and amazing business acumen, generating not just business for himself, but those around him. Black Sam being one of the spearheading powers that has managed and taken his the Marathon Continues and his All Money In brand moving forward since his unfortunate passing. Now, of course, Nipsey Hussle had a very particular sound that I don't think was, occasionally I think Nipsey really dove into more hyper West Coast sounding production. But I would say that he was one of the West Coast artists that really took on a sound that was more familiar with like the Maybach Music Group, where Rick Ross was doing more cinematic type music, quote unquote, and of course records that just seemed more, I guess, dramatic and more soundtrack focused. Right? It wasn't so much about the bounce and so much about, making jingles or catchy melodies, but more about providing a soundscape for Nipsey to deliver his flow. His flow has never been fast or complex. Maybe I don't even think he's as upbeat as like a Tupac was, but I would say that his ability to pronounce and enunciate and deliver his lyrics in a clear and effective fashion really made him as prolific as he ever wanted to be. Now, of course, with Nipsey Hussle being such a huge name, unfortunately, specifically after his passing, generating attention and notoriety around the country and around the world after the fact, which unfortunately happens with a lot of artists once something like this happens. Now, on Prolific, I think they continue what they started in No Pressure, providing us with records that, like I said on Instagram before, I do feel like a lot of these albums, sometimes you just never really know what you're going to get because the estate might generate different changes and tweak the artistic integrity of the album outside of what the artist wants to do, outside of what the artist intended for the art to be, because they feel like it might make it more successful. Now, with that being said, I don't really feel like there's a lot of tweaks or changes on this album. I'm sure there's information out there on why the album took this long to actually come out. Obviously, Black Sam has been pretty busy as long as with the Marathon Continues and All Money In, generating the foundation for what the future would be for the Nipsey Hussle brand name, with him obviously getting a street named after him, and obviously tons of reputation focus branding that has gone into not just the restaurant enterprises, but the clothing brands and everything that revolves around the Nipsey Hussle name. Now, on the project, I do think that there's a ton of records, and I feel like a lot of this music is, very on brand. It's very much what we're used to hearing. And unlike some albums, this one sounds like exactly where Nipsey left off. And because we love that sound, and because we love his voice, and his message in his music so much, I think it's very easy to consume this entire project in its entirety without really having to nitpick at it or decide that, oh, this one's not good, or this one's not, or this one's amazing. But within all of that, we do get a few records that I do feel like stand out and elevate the potential of this album to an entirely different spectrum. Records like the Leon Thomas feature, as well as the Buddy feature, which I think is one of the best records on this project, as well as, he's got 2 Ty Dolla $ign features, but the second one, I Just Want to Know, also features Cardi B, which is a record that we had heard of before. He had talked about it in interviews. He was very happy and definitely championed Cardi B. Nipsey Hussle was never somebody that was very negative or even spoke negatively. I think if he even had anything negative to say, he would just not say nothing at all, with obviously his old school fashion way of thinking. But this particular record was something that we knew existed. We just hadn't heard it before. But to me, I think this one probably has the most commercial, universal appeal out of any of the other records, as well as the Buddy record. Now, with that being said, let's talk about Bino. I mean, Bino does an amazing job on this album of delivering both vocals in melody and also the raps. I mean, to be able to do this and to really carry the load for a project that, even though it is a collaboration, it has to be kind of odd to kind of like be the face of this album with the second face of the album, a mentor, a guiding light for your career, to have gone out the way he did, and as soon as he did, and as suddenly as he did. So I mean, shout out to Bino. I saw some people criticizing the project, saying, oh, who is this Bino guy that I came here to listen to Nipsey? It's like, yeah, that lets me know that you didn't listen to Nipsey until he passed. Now, with that being said, let's talk about the album, because I guess for me, honestly, the biggest criticism that I have of this album is that it seems more like an album to market Bino moving forward, which I'm sure Nipsey would have wanted. But it seems more that than a album that's pushing and championing Nipsey's excellence, right? I mean, with Make 'Em Believe, you see both of them really shining on this project, and it really seems like almost a message to Bino on how to carry the torch moving forward. Both with respect and how to move through the industry and through obviously the streets, which, obviously Bino is not a household name. He's not a staple in hip hop. He's still building his foundation for his brand. But Make Believe is my first selection for the album. And to me, really sets the tone for what the album should be. Now, I do feel like the album is way too slow, way too soon. Which I think plays well into what the brand and the soundscape is for Nipsey's brand of music always. I think this is a great album that you can listen to just about any time, more specifically in times that, you kind of just want to just do nothing and you just want to like reflect on life. I think he makes great music for that. But for this album to be a commercial success, which I'm not sure, it may or may not have been their goal and their intention, which I understand, I feel like the sequence is a little bit off. So we'll tap into that a little bit later, and I'll explain why in a minute. Now, Count on You is my second selection on the album, probably one of the most dynamic records on the project. When I listen to music and when I review albums, I like to start with a casual listen where I'm maybe cleaning the house or maybe editing some videos or editing some photos, and then putting things together and then listening to that on the background. That allows me to really allow the music to let me know when something triggers my attention, and then I go, ooh, what record is that? And then I'll mark that down. Then on my second listen, I really dive into the album and get more into the lyrics, the direction of each song, and what the messaging is. And by the third listen, I'm really just certifying what I felt in the first and second listen to allow me to kind of come to conclusions and maybe get a little bit more analytical with what's happening on the record. Now, of course, where hip hop, I do feel like generally has a lot more current events within the albums and the music and the art. Obviously, this album doesn't really carry that. And because Bino is more so a crooner than anything else, I would say that his lyrics don't really carry as much current events updates as we normally would get, right? Where if Nipsey was alive, we would really get a lot of updates and lines that would connect on things that we know to be true today. Now, nonetheless, I do feel like Count on You is probably Bino's best performance on this project as far as delivering this hook, and he carries a huge load of the weight from this project. But again, this is not a project that feels dated. It's not a project that feels like it's not Nipsey at his prime. It feels like Nipsey was just here yesterday, and this is just a continuation from where we're at with No Pressure, like I said before. Now, my third selection on the project is Just Like Me with Buddy, which honestly is maybe one of my favorites. I don't think this is the most commercially viable record on this project, but I do feel like Just Like Me has one of the most memorable hooks and really stands out to me as maybe one of the records I'm going to hit play on the most. And that to me, it has maybe one of the most replay values on a day-to-day basis, that I can pretty much listen to this at any time doing whatever it is I'm doing. So I do really enjoy this record for that reason. And on top of that, I do feel like this has a great connectivity to men and women alike. After all, what do we want more in a relationship than somebody that truly connects with us, that truly knows us, that knows what we want, what we're thinking, what we're feeling without us even having to say a word. Somebody that, honestly, it's kind of what we saw from Nipsey and Lauren London while Nipsey was here. And I know there's a lot of, conspiracies and speculation on Lauren London and her intentions with Nipsey. But all in all, I do feel like their relationship, at least in the public eye, seemed like a very collaborative and co-supportive relationship, which is what we all want. Nobody wants that toxic relationship. Nobody wants that publicly humiliating relationship. And I do feel like they held each other down in a very admirable way. And I always remember looking at their relationship as the ideal relationship as far as their interactions. I mean, everybody has their issues behind closed doors, but as far as when you get to a collaborative and a relationship with another person, that is what you want. You want that to remain behind closed doors, because the public should know all your business, even if you are a celebrity. Now, next up is Situations, a record that I added kind of late in my listening process, and it was more so because I felt like I connected to it more on a personal level. I mean, like, doesn't this feel like what we go through on a day-to-day basis? Like, even online, I started this podcast probably 3 months ago, and it seems like the only way for me to make this podcast successful is to kind of raise some eyebrows and make people question and get mad and react. And, that seems to be kind of the narrative around social media and the internet in general, right? Like, I can't just sit here and be like, I love this album, how about you? And then this is going to take off. No, it seems like I have to be critical. I have to judge, and I have to criticize, and I have to call out people for their bullshit, and I have to have these really hot takes, because then people will react and get emotional about those messages. Now, for me, I don't have an issue being honest and keeping it 100 with you guys, and I think you guys know that by now, because I don't really give a shit who gets offended or who takes anything personal, because at the end of the day, however I feel about the music, which is what I like to focus on, is how I feel about the music. But Situations definitely made me feel like, I don't know, it just made me feel like what we're all dealing with on a day-to-day basis. It seems like every day it's, I either got to argue with somebody and correct somebody, or even in real life, it's like every day it's something. I'm either chasing a bag or fixing a problem, or I have a client that I got to deal with. And so Situations, even though to me it doesn't have a huge commercial vibe to it, I feel like this one is one that I really connect with on a really heavy level. I don't think I even put it on my selections list, but when it comes to the Hip Hop Report playlist, it will be on there because I do feel like this record has such a strong grasp on the life that we all lead today. And ironically also, even though it's a slower record, I do feel like this album is prolific in the sense of I can listen to this album at any time. I don't have to be in the club. I don't have to be here. I don't have to be there. And I feel like that's what this album does. This album is something that I can play just about any time and I can vibe to it. I can go to the gym with it. I can go, anything that I got going on throughout the day. If I'm just driving around at night, I can do it to this album because it doesn't demand a certain vibe. It is a vibe within itself. Now, speaking of vibes, we got Vibe With Me with Leon Thomas, one of the artists that I feel like has been as prolific. I'm going to keep saying that word, but he's had an amazing year, not just working with T.I., but also he was on the 50 Cent theme song for Origins. He's just been all over the place. I even saw a meme or a video where somebody asked somebody if they preferred Leon Thomas or Giveon. Now, I think both of these are amazing artists with amazing voices that have had incredible careers thus far. And unlike, the hip hop side of things, I do feel like singers and R&B, for the most part, unless they're on a verses, seem to be able to coexist and create music and create art without having to be conflicted or against each other or having to have these dynamics where they have to debate each other in any kind of way. And so I do feel like R&B doesn't get as much attention because of that. But also I do feel like because of that, R&B is a genre that is pretty much consumable at any time of the day, any situation of the week, and you're able to just enjoy it without having all these intricate layers to kind of peel back and dissect. You know what I mean? And with that, we get to the end of the album, where I feel like the most upbeat records of this project are. And like I said, this is what makes me feel like this project is less made for commercial success and more made for the Nipsey Hussle fan base. And, obviously for Bino to showcase his skills in singing, melody, and even his raps that are still melody. But with that being said, All Summer with BH, I think is one of the first upbeat bounce records that we get on this project. And for me, it really makes me want to reimagine what prolific would be like if we were catering this for commercial success. Obviously, if Nipsey was still here, he would be releasing this with the intention of releasing another one afterwards. So the idea would be to build momentum where, I think this album, I don't know how many more albums they may release or music they may release from Nipsey, but I don't think they will do as much as maybe some other artists have in the past, like Tupac or things like that. I'm not sure if Nipsey recorded at that level as far as like amount of music that he put together. But I do feel like this album may be one of those things where it's like kind of the fade out. It's kind of the close. It does feel like the closing credits to the Nipsey Hussle movie in a way. And I feel like maybe that's why those records are a little bit later in the project, because not only is All Summer super upbeat and slaps, but also the next record, I Just Want to Know, featuring Ty Dolla $ign and Cardi B, a record that we had already heard about from Nipsey when he was alive. He was very happy with Cardi B's feature and what she did on the record. And I think she delivered also. Obviously Bino delivered, and I think Ty Dolla always kills it. His voice is, he almost can't miss at this point. But with the Cardi B verse, you're getting raunchy, nasty. You just didn't know you were getting it from Nipsey. I mean, this record specifically, if you guys remember you don't even have to remember the lyrics to WAP. You already know what that was about. But I do feel like Nipsey almost had to elevate his direction for what Cardi was doing. I wonder if he redid I guess his hook might have already been there, but who knows? It's very rare. I feel like we get this graphic of lyrical content from Nipsey. But it's only right because Cardi's on the record. And if Cardi's on the record, this is what it is. I mean, even ending the verse with "Can I give you head in public" is crazy, but she even takes us back and reminds us that she came from the strip club lifestyle. And so it's no surprise of some of the lines that she says on here. Obviously, the notable one being if a crip can fuck with a blood bitch, which I think is, not just clever, but to me I wonder if this is one of those verses she wrote. I know she always had writers, so who knows if she had a writer come in and do this. I'm sure it's online somewhere. But for me, when I listen to albums, I don't want to dig overly deep. And this is why I listen to them the way I do, because I want to have the experience of a casual fan as they're listening to something new. But I really enjoy the verse from Cardi. I thought Ty Dolla $ign really delivers. And to me, I'll probably add this to the Song of the Summer playlist as a late entry, because we still got a month and a half of great weather, at least over here. Obviously, Cali's a little bit different, but nonetheless, I do feel like Cardi delivers a great verse on here, and I just wished we would have had this record way sooner, way long ago. And I wish, obviously, I wish Nipsey was here for all of this, but more specifically, I just wish that Nipsey was here to kind of see the success of this album, and that we could see him enjoy the execution of this album. Now, we close out the album with Back of the Back, which I think personally could have been way sooner. I think this is a great opening record personally. And like I said, I do feel like this album could use a reimagined presentation, where we take the tracks and we put them in a playlist and we reorder them in a way that is a little bit more commercially appealing. Hopefully Black Sam approves of that. But, nonetheless, we enjoy the album. We always want to hear new Nipsey. And even if we never hear any more Nipsey music, I think this album really delivers a great experience. It's not overly loaded with features. We only get, obviously, Bino, but we get Cardi, we get Leon Thomas, we get Buddy. We get people that allowed Nipsey to be Nipsey without overloading the record for the sake of streams or for the sake of maximizing some commercial appeal that isn't even within Nipsey Hussle's brand. Now, look, as always, the marathon will always continue. All money in. The marathon continues. All money in. West. You already know what it is. Rambo Hustle with the Hip Hop Report. Hustle. Yeah.